The desert was golden, but the destiny was of ashes. Thousands of years ago, Egypt, the greatest power in the world, decreed a silent genocide. Every Hebrew boy that is born shall be thrown into the river. This is not just the story of a kingdom. It is the story of a people who saw their children being stolen and thrown into the waters. But what the Pharaoh did not know is that in the middle of that river of death, a mother placed the seed of freedom. And that is where our story begins. Stay until the end and discover the faith that defied the most powerful throne on earth. The desert wind blew hot over the plains of Egypt, raising golden clouds of sand that mingled with the sunlight, as if the sky itself silently observed the destiny of a people who once had found shelter under the kindness of a king. The busy streets of Pi-Ramesses echoed the sound of hammers, shouted orders, and the distant lament of men bent under the weight of bricks. Time had transformed gratitude into oblivion. The story of Joseph, the foreigner who saved Egypt from famine, had become a shadow erased by the whims of a new Pharaoh, a hardened, proud, and fearful man of the growing power of the children of Israel. In the palaces, his voice resonated coldly. Behold, the people of the children of Israel are many, and more powerful than we. His words were not just a political decree, but the harbinger of centuries of pain. The peace that had reigned between Egyptians and Hebrews began to dissolve slowly, like gold that fades when touched by fire. Under the Pharaoh's watchful eye, Egypt turned into a vast, forced labor field. The sound of chains mixed with the hoarse chanting of captives, who still sought in the memories of Abraham's promises a breath of hope. And they appointed taskmasters over them to afflict them with their burdens. Exodus 1:11. The Hebrews built cities that did not belong to them, stored wealth they would never touch, and each dawn their hands bled more, yet their families grew, as if life insisted on flourishing in the soil of oppression. The Egyptians, frightened by this inexplicable multiplication, became cruel. Fear turned into hatred, and hatred into decree. Suffering would become the new instrument of the empire. However, in the shadows of the granaries and furnaces, the elders of Israel whispered the name of Jehovah, remembering that the God who saved their fathers was still alive and would soon hear the cry of his people. Egypt shone in its external glories, marble temples, hanging gardens and rivers reflecting the sunlight, but behind this beauty, there was a groan rising from the depths of forced labor. On the banks of the Nile, the sweat and tears of the Hebrews mixed with the mud of bricks, and the Egyptians made the children of Israel serve with rigor. Exodus 1:13. With every whip strike, the air was filled with pain and silence. Yet God's people grew. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and the more they spread abroad. Exodus 1:12. It was as if the divine breath itself strengthened them amidst oppression. The Hebrews became like stars that no one could count, a living promise in the midst of slavery. With each child born, hope was renewed, and even without understanding, they knew that God had not forgotten them, even if his silence seemed long. However, the Pharaoh, consumed by fear and arrogance, conceived a dark plan. His heart, hardened like the stones of his palaces, was moved by an evil force whispering in the shadows, "Destroy the children of Israel before they can rise against you." And the decree was issued. The midwives should kill every Hebrew boy at birth. But in them was something greater than the fear of the king. There was the fear of the Lord. Shiphrah and Puah, moved by faith, dared to disobey the order of the most powerful throne on earth. When Pharaoh called them, their voices did not tremble. The Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. They are strong and have already given birth before the midwives arrived to them. Exodus 1:19. God looked upon them with favor and blessed their households. However, the king's hatred flared, and the order echoed through the streets and rivers of Egypt. Every son that is born, you shall cast into the river, but all the daughters you shall save alive. Exodus 1:22. A silent cry rose to heaven that night, and God heard. The Pharaoh's decree hung like a shadow over Egypt, spreading terror in Hebrew homes. But in the midst of pain and despair, the faith of a couple shone like a flame that the wind could not extinguish. Amram and Jochebed, of the tribe of Levi, received a son, a beautiful child, Exodus 2:2. And when they looked at the small face bathed in light, they felt that God had set him apart for a greater purpose. Jochebed's heart trembled, but her faith was firm. They did not fear the king's command, the Hebrews 11:23. For 3 months she hid him among cloths, silencing his cry with tenderness and whispered prayers. Every sound from the street made her chest shiver. She knew that at any moment, soldiers could cross the door. But every time she looked at the child, she remembered the promises made to the patriarchs and chose to believe. When hiding was no longer possible, Jochebed surrendered her heart to divine will. With trembling hands, she prepared a small ark of bulrushes, coated with bitumen and pitch so that neither the water nor the decree could destroy him. She placed the child inside, covered him with a cloth and set him among the reeds of the river. Tears mixed with the waters of the Nile, but she knew the same God who had opened the sea to save Israel would one day open a path for this little one. Miriam, her daughter, stayed at a distance, watching with her heart in suspense. Then delicate steps approached, the Pharaoh's daughter, guided not by chance but by angels invisibly surrounding the scene. Upon opening the ark, the princess encountered a soft cry that broke the river's silence. Her gaze filled with compassion, and she decided this child would live. Miriam then ran, her voice firm and wise. "Shall I go and call a Hebrew woman to nurse this child for you?" Exodus 2:7. And the answer came like a divine breath. "Take this child and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages." Exodus 2:9. Jochebed, now a servant of God and a rewarded mother, received back in her arms the son she had entrusted to the hands of the Most High. The simple walls of Jochebed's house became a sanctuary. The sound of slave labor outside contrasted with the peace surrounding that home, where a mother raised her child for God. Every word spoken was a seed of eternity. Jochebed knew time was short. Soon she would have to hand him over to the Pharaoh's daughter, and so every glance, every prayer, every lesson carried the weight of eternity. She showed Moses the starry sky and said, "It was the God who created all this who kept you from the river." She taught him the value of justice, the purity of truth, and the power of faith. In her arms, the child learned to revere the invisible. When he knelt, he did not see stone statues, but felt the living presence of a God who called him by name. Jochebed, a slave before men, became a queen before God, shaping the heart of the one who would become the liberator of nations. Years passed quietly, and when Moses was about 12, the day came when the mother had to give him up. The Pharaoh's palace awaited him, with its golden columns and stone gods. But no wealth could erase the truths carved into his heart. Amid luxury, Moses still heard his mother's voice echoing, "Remember the God of your fathers." The lessons of childhood would sustain him when Egypt's glory tried to corrupt him. The love and faith of Jochebed had planted in him an invisible resistance. The conviction that the power and wisdom of men are nothing before God's will. And thus the Hebrew child grew among princes, yet retaining in his gaze the flame of the slaves who awaited redemption. The whole sky contemplated that humble woman, and eternity witnessed the fruit of her faithfulness. The liberator of Israel was born first in the heart of a mother who chose to trust God. The shadows of the palace contrasted with the light that once shone in. Jochebed's humble house. The hands that shaped a liberator did not wield scepters, but prayers. The echo of that mother's faith crossed the corridors of Egypt and reached Moses' heart. Now grown among princes, may every mother looking at her child understand the eternity of each gesture, for it is in the early years, in words spoken at the bedside and silent prayers, that eternal destinies are forged. Many whom the world applauds for greatness owe their character to an invisible woman who knelt in tears. On the day of reckoning, heaven will reveal that the victories of kings, prophets, and saints were first born in the heart of a mother who chose to teach the path of faith, even in the midst of slavery. Moses grew surrounded by the wisdom and glory of the Egyptian court, and Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and was mighty in words and deeds. Acts 7:22. Pharaoh saw in him the worthy successor to his throne, the heir capable of perpetuating his dynasty. Moses excelled in battlefields, assemblies, and the schools of the empire. Satan had been defeated. The death decree meant to extinguish the liberator served to educate him in the heart of the oppressing nation itself. While Egypt saw him as a future king, the heavens saw him as an instrument of deliverance. The angels secretly instructed him. The time of liberation approached, and he would be God's chosen. But Moses, imagining that redemption would come by the sword, prepared as a warrior. His spirit, divided between the throne and the promise, still needed to learn that a true liberator's strength comes not from the sword, but from submission to God's will. The priests of Egypt called him to the temples and rituals, demanding that he bow before the stone gods. It was law that every heir to the throne be initiated into the mysteries of the national religion, but Moses, even wrapped in royal robes, remained faithful to the God of his mother. No argument could make him bend. "Only the Creator of heaven and earth is worthy of worship," he said firmly. The princess, his adoptive mother, wept, fearing to lose him. The priests threatened him with the loss of the crown. Still, Moses remained unwavering. His faith resisted the gold of the temples, the Pharaoh's crowns, and the shine of idols. Although tolerated because of his position and influence, the palace was no longer his home. Within it, the Hebrew heart beat strong, reminding him that he had been saved from the waters to serve the living God, and not the gods of Egypt. The golden columns of Pharaoh's palace reflected the fleeting glory of an empire, but within Moses grew something gold could not buy, the certainty that he belonged to another kingdom. By faith, Moses, when he was grown, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, Hebrews 11:24. Silently he observed the luxury around him. Banquets, music, incense, and power. All belonged to him if he simply chose to stay. But his heart burned, remembering the tired voices of the slaves, his brothers bent under the weight of servitude. He knew Egypt's treasures were smoke before God's promise, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasure of sin. Hebrews 11:25. In that decision, Moses renounced the crown of men and received by faith the invitation to the eternal crown. The Prince of Egypt became a pilgrim in his own palace. His prayers were silent, his eyes often turned to the sky shining over the Nile. God had shown him, through faith, what mortal eyes could not see: an uncontaminated kingdom, an incorruptible inheritance, a reward that time could never steal. The throne of Egypt and men's applause became dust before the glory promised to those who remain faithful. Moses saw beyond riches and feasts the corruption consuming the palaces and the idolatry imprisoning souls. He chose to unite with that oppressed, despised, yet loved people of God. In the stone corridors, angels secretly prepared him. His faith grew while the world called him foolish. He exchanged scepters for servitude, but in the invisible hands of the Almighty, the liberator began to be born. At 40, Moses still walked between two worlds. His mind, instructed by the Egyptians, and his heart, marked by the God of the Hebrews, waged a silent war. Many times he visited his brothers at the construction works, trying to comfort them with hope of the promised liberation. But the weight of injustice consumed him. One day, seeing an Egyptian cruelly beating an Israelite, his blood boiled. He intervened and killed the oppressor, burying the body in the sand. The sand covered the crime but not destiny. He supposed his brethren would have understood how God would deliver them by his hand, but they understood not. Acts 7:25. The next day he tried to reconcile two quarreling Hebrews, but was rejected. "Who made you a prince and a judge over us? Will you kill me as you killed the Egyptian?" Exodus 2:14. His own words condemned him. Rumors grew, reached the palace, and the king, furious, decreed his death. Moses fled, leaving behind the throne, treasures, and name, taking only the faith that would guide him through the desert toward the promise. The desert of Midian opened as a refuge for Moses, away from Egypt's gold and palace intrigues. His steps, guided by the Lord, found hospitality in the house of Jethro, priest of God and prince of his land. There, among tents and the quiet herding of flocks, Moses discovered a simplicity that luxurious life had never offered. He married one of Jethro's daughters, and for 40 years his work was tending the cattle and learning the lessons hidden in the mountains. Each dawn, the desert wind brought him lessons of patience. Each sunset, the vast sky taught humility. The boy who had been a prince became a servant, and in every act of care for the animals, his heart was shaped to care for an entire nation. God transformed humble labor into a school of character, preparing the liberator in silence and anonymity. Moses' mistake in killing the Egyptian remained a vivid memory in his mind. He now understood that it would not be by the sword that God would free Israel, but by his own power. That act, though rash, had been guided by providence to shape his discernment. The solitude of the mountains and the pastoral routine taught him to control his passions, exercise patience, and subordinate his desires to God's will. There, away from the influence of luxury and Egyptian idolatry, Moses learned obedience, care, and preparation of the heart for leadership. Each challenge with the flock, each decision about the animals' welfare, was a lesson in compassion and responsibility. God transformed the man forced to flee into a leader, trained to govern with wisdom and justice, preparing him to teach the same obedience and faith to an entire people. During these 40 years, Moses unlearned what Egypt had imprinted in his soul. The influences of the court, the worship of stone gods, the pomp of temples, the flattery of nobles, and the splendor of constructions had left deep marks on his character. But isolation, humble labor, and daily communion with God slowly removed these imprints, replacing vanities and errors with faith and discernment. Every inner conflict, every struggle against old habits and human grandeur, was faced with prayer and trust in divine help. God, who preserved him from Pharaoh's hands and placed him among the flocks, promised to guide every step of the man who would liberate Israel. There in the hills of Midian, Moses not only learned to shepherd sheep, but his heart was shaped to shepherd souls, to lead a chosen people to freedom with patience, courage, and unwavering faith. In the deserts of Midian, among silent mountains and valleys, Moses experienced the most demanding and transformative school, solitude with God. Time became discipline, and every moment of watching the flock was a lesson in patience, care, and reverence. The riches and splendor of Egypt no longer held power over his spirit. Temples, idols, and false rituals were shadows before the majesty revealed in the hills and infinite sky. By faith, Moses understood that it was not enough to receive human instruction. Effort, incessant prayer, and the rejection of bad habits and prejudices were necessary, for only by uniting discipline with divine aid could victory be achieved. James 1:5. Each day of shepherding, each silence of the desert, molded his humility and gentle strength, preparing him to lead the chosen people. As years passed, Moses' heart burned for Israel's oppression. He remembered the promises made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and his eyes turned toward the desert and sky were beacons of constant prayer. Inspired by the Spirit, he reviewed memories, stories, and divine truths recording in his heart and writing the book of Genesis. Angels, invisible, poured light upon him, strengthening his spirit and filling his solitude with hope and revelation. Every moment of his pastoral life, every challenge in tending the flock made him patient, reverent, humble, and firm in faith. Thus the liberator was being formed, still far from glory, but ready to obey the Most High's designs and serve his eternal purpose. And the time came, as foretold, when the cry of the people of Israel rose to God. And it came to pass in process of time that the king of Egypt died, and the children of Israel sighed by reason of the bondage, and they cried, and their cry came up unto God by reason of the bondage. Exodus 2:23-25. The Lord was about to reveal his power and glorify his name, choosing the humble shepherd Moses as the instrument of deliverance. One day, guiding his flocks near Horeb, the mountain of God, Exodus 3:1, he saw a burning bush whose branches were not consumed. Approaching, the voice of God called him by name. Here am I. Trembling, he heard the sacred warning. Take off your shoes, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. I'm the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Exodus 3:4-6. Covering his face, Moses trembled, recognizing the infinite glory of the one who spoke, the same God who had guided his ancestors and now called him to lead a people to freedom. Before the burning bush, Moses felt the weight of God's holiness. Each flame reflected not only power but the unattainable holiness of the Almighty, and his heart bowed in deep reverence. Humility and awe filled his soul. He understood that he could not approach the Almighty as if he were familiar with his greatness, but only with submission, like Jacob, silently exclaiming, "How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven." Genesis 28:17. The shepherd-turned-messenger felt the weight of the responsibility entrusted to him. God was not only revealing his plan, but granting authority, promising that he would not be alone. "Surely I will be with you, and this shall be a sign unto you that I have sent you." Exodus 3:12. Every sacred word imprinted itself on Moses' mind and heart, shaping him to obey with courage, and unwavering faith. The Lord revealed the suffering of the people of Israel, describing in detail their affliction under the Egyptian taskmasters. I have surely seen the affliction of my people, which are in Egypt, and have heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. And I am come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land unto a good land, and a large, unto a land flowing with milk and honey. Exodus 3:7-8. Each phrase sounded across the desert like a touch of hope. Moses, astonished, pondered his insufficiency. Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? But the divine promise assured him of God's presence and the sign of the mission, to lead the people to the mountain of worship, service, and surrender to God. Exodus 3:11-12. The shepherd no longer saw himself merely as a man, but as an instrument of providence, ready to witness the Creator's power. Doubt still tried to assail Moses. How could he convince a people almost destitute of knowledge of God, with hearts hardened by slavery? And Moses said unto God, Behold, when I come unto the children of Israel, and shall say unto them, The God of your fathers hath sent me unto you, and they shall say to me, What is his name? What shall I say unto them? Exodus 3:13. The divine response, simple and immeasurable, made his heart tremble. I am that I am, and he said, Thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am hath sent me unto you. Exodus 3:14. Moses understood that he did not need human wisdom to convince them. The authority of God, whose presence would be a visible sign and protection for every step, would suffice. The mission would begin with the elders of Israel, chosen for faith and justice before confronting Pharaoh, whose resistance would provide the perfect opportunity for God's power to manifest in all its glory. Exodus 3:18-20. The humble shepherd, now transformed into a liberator, felt the calling of a mission beyond his understanding, whose fulfillment would depend on his obedience and unwavering faith. The silent desert became a stage of living lessons for Moses. Every gesture, every sign granted by the Lord, carried divine authority and the assurance that he would not abandon his servant. The staff turning into a serpent, fleeing from his presence and then returning to its original form, made visible the Creator's power over all things, challenging the natural skepticism of the human heart. When the shepherd's hand became leprous and was then healed, Moses understood that God could transform weakness into strength and limitation into an instrument of wonder. Every physical test, every supernatural demonstration, was not just to convince the people or Pharaoh, but to strengthen the faith of the chosen one himself, making him feel God's presence in every detail of his mission. Exodus 4:1-6. Reverent fear mingled with growing trust, and Moses' heart burned with readiness for the great work. Even faced with these extraordinary signs, Moses' mind still hesitated. O my Lord, I am not eloquent, neither heretofore nor since you have spoken unto your servant, but I am slow of speech and of a slow tongue. Exodus 4:10. Years away from Egypt had made him insecure, and the responsibility of speaking for God before a powerful king seemed overwhelming. But the Lord, knowing each doubt, reaffirmed his sovereign power. Who hath made man's mouth? Or who maketh the dumb or deaf or the seeing or the blind? Have not I the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with thy mouth, and teach thee what thou shalt say. Exodus 4:11-12. Every divine word was both a balm and a weapon, teaching Moses that he did not depend on his human ability, but on God's guidance, which would lead his steps and give eloquence and authority where he felt insufficient. Still, human hesitation persisted. Moses suggested that someone else more capable be chosen for the task, while humility and awe mixed with natural insecurity. But the Lord, patient, assured that no human or natural obstacle would prevent the divine plan. Each refusal, though seemingly prudent, demonstrated the necessity of trusting entirely in God's power. The voice of the Almighty echoed not only as instruction, but as a test of fidelity. God would guide his chosen, empower his mouth, give courage to his heart, and above all, make Moses the instrument of Israel's deliverance, showing that the great work depends not on men, but on the Almighty who guides and strengthens. Exodus 4:13-16. Thus the shepherd became a liberator, guided by signs, promises, and unwavering faith. ready to face the impossible through divine strength. Moses was instructed to have Aaron, his brother, as spokesperson and helper, joining their efforts under God's guidance. "Thou shalt speak unto him, and put words in his mouth, and I will be with thy mouth, and with his mouth, and will teach you what ye shall do. And he shall be thy spokesman unto the people, and he shall be as a mouth for thee, and thou shalt be to him as God." Exodus 4:15-17. Thus every human barrier and natural insecurity was removed, and Moses, even feeling incapable, could begin his mission with full confidence in the Lord. The greatness of his work demanded that his best spiritual faculties be employed, and God, rewarding obedience, transformed him into an eloquent, secure leader fit for divine service. This episode demonstrates that true strength and efficiency come from humbly submitting to responsibilities entrusted by God, accepting his help to overcome one's own weakness. Moses returned to Midian and received Jethro's blessing to depart, "Go in peace." Exodus 4:18. With his wife and children, he began the journey toward Egypt, keeping the mission's objective secret, fearing for his family's safety. On the way, he realized that his initial hesitation was justified. Pharaoh's old hostility and that of the Egyptian people still posed danger. However, by fully committing to God's command, Moses received the revelation that the enemies would be defeated by God's power, confirming the Lord's protection over him and his people. Trust in divine care was solidified, showing that the success of the mission depended not on human strength, but on obedience and fidelity to God's plan. Along the journey, Moses faced a terrible warning. An angel threatened his life because he had neglected the circumcision of his youngest son, ignoring God's command that ensured blessing and protection for his family and mission. Zipporah, his wife, quickly intervened, performing the rite, and the threat ceased. This situation highlights that even a chosen one, in full divine mission, is not free from danger when ignoring clear precepts of the Lord. Angelic protection depends on faithfulness to the commandments. Just as Moses, all who set out to fulfill God's will must be attentive to obedience's details, for neglecting a known duty can jeopardize divine protection and the success of his work. Both in the past and in the final times before Christ's coming, the story of Moses, the basket boy who became a prince and then a liberator, is proof that one person's faith can change a nation's destiny. These may every mother, when looking at her child, understand the eternity of each gesture. And you, did you enjoy diving into the depths of this story of oppression, faith, and redemption? Leave your like to help us reach more people with this powerful message. Comment below which part of Jochebed's faith or Moses' courage impacted you the most. And of course, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss the continuation of this saga. So next week, we'll discover what the desert taught the future liberator. Thank you so much for your company and audience. May the faith that sustained this people inspire you every day. See you next time.